Okay. So Paulina has introduced me to a lot of very interesting people in Uvascular, where I've been staying for the last 3 days. I met a brilliant dance company and some people at the hospital there who are they coordinate the collection at the hospital in Uvascular, and I met them and I talked to them about the work that we do in Manchester. It was very well received, and I had some really interesting discussions with people. So, in brief, in summary, what I'm going to talk to you about is my work in Manchester, and the majority of the work that I do is very much about the patient and the staff and participatory work. So we had a brand new hospital built in 2009. Hang on, I need to thank the City of Espoo as well for having me here. I'm very, very grateful. And I just want to say that I'm so inspired by the work that you've done in the hospitals, and the artwork, the architecture is absolutely incredible. I'm so inspired and so impressed by the work that you're doing here. It's fantastic, and I'm learning so much. And I hope that I can teach you, educate about this participatory aspect of continuing the creativity once the hospital's been built and once all these artworks have been installed. How do we then continue making art and continue having a creativity in our hospitals? So, Lime is an arts organisation based at the Central Manchester Foundation Trust. So that is a hospital, the Central Manchester Hospitals. It's the largest teaching hospital in Europe. We currently have a workforce of 35,000 members of staff at this trust, at this hospital. It's enormous. Lime has been based at the hospital. The first arts project started in 1973. So if my maths are correct, we've been there for about 45 years. We're the oldest arts project, one of the oldest arts projects in the UK. My focus, my work is very much about process-driven modes of engagement. So, like I just said, that's about working with staff and working with patients and involving them in the creative process to then create artistic outcomes. We commission artists and musicians to lead our projects. We train and mentor students and professional artists, so we have close links with the universities, and we encourage students with an interest in arts and well-being to come and work on our projects alongside the lead artists. We also coordinate an artist residency programme. We currently have a painter in residence. And then just a little bit about me. I've worked in arts and health for 17 years. I've worked at Lime for 10 years. I've been the director of Lime for 2 years. I'm a visual artist. I specialise in printmaking. I've said all that already. I have a passion for facilitating process-driven modes of engagement, and I exhibit regularly in London and across the UK. So I'm going to take, what I want to do is take people on my journey, because what's been really interesting for me is being putting this presentation together has been looking back at the work that I've done, that I've project managed and I've worked as an artist on. And it's brought back lots of memories, and I've been going through diaries that I used to keep when I was working with patients on projects. And I want to share the journey with you, because as an arts organisation, we may be embedded in the hospital at Manchester. We've been there for a long time, but still it's a struggle to keep going with the arts and continuing the arts, and we have to be very adaptable and responsive to the changing nature of the NHS. That there is currently a health reform going on in Manchester, whereby the nature of The hospitals is changing because the government don't own the hospitals anymore. We have private landlords who own our hospitals, and this has been presenting some new issues for us, which we've had to kind of adapt to, which I will kind of talk about at the end. And my focus is to engage as many people as possible and continue working with the people and having as much creative activity ongoing at the hospital as possible. So I've just put this up here, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I think it sums things up quite nicely in the wider global context. Everyone has the right to freely participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts and to share in scientific advancements and its benefits. Recently, we had a publication produced, a 3-year inquiry into the benefit of arts and health and the impact the arts have on well-being. This is the document. It's like the Bible of the artist working in hospitals, because everywhere you go, people say, especially funders, how can you prove this work? How can you prove that this work has an impact on mental well-being? How can you prove, show us the figures, show us the numbers. So this document includes very, very, very concise information. For example, an Arts on Prescription project has shown a 37% drop in GP consultation rates and a 27% reduction in hospital admissions. This represents a saving of £216 per patient. We also have another great point here, a mental health recovery centre co-designed with service users in Wales is estimated to have saved the NHS £300,000 a year. So we've got some really heavy facts in this document that when people ask us these questions, we can fire these facts back at them, and they're very effective. I've put a link here for everybody. You can download this document on the internet free of charge. And I do advise that you, if you're interested in evidence-based research, that you have a look at this. It's full of really great case studies and examples of brilliant projects that are going on in the UK, all around the UK at the moment. And then the 3 key messages of the document: the arts can keep us well, aid our recovery and support longer lives better lived. The arts can help meet major challenges facing health and social care, ageing, long-term conditions, loneliness and mental health. The arts can help save money in the health service and social care, and all the information to support those statements are in that document. And there's a summary, a really nice visual summary of all the money that we can save from investing in the arts. Right, that bit's done. So I'm going to talk about the projects that we do in Manchester. I'm going to just go over some, it's like a portfolio section, this bit, so I just want to give you an idea of what we do. And the last 2 years have been heavily focused on transforming the hospital department. So all our work is charitably funded, and we're fortunate at Manchester to have a fundraising team based at the hospitals. So the fundraising team have very good relationships with various trusts and foundations and rich people in the Northwest who donate money for us to do these projects. We also apply to the Arts Promotion Centre equivalent, which is the Arts Council. We have lots and lots of trusts and foundations that we can tap into to fund our projects. And I know it's very different here, and I've had some very interesting conversations about how things are set up here and how things could potentially be set up to benefit the arts and the continuation of the arts in hospitals. So our new hospital was built in 2009, and similarly to what we've all been presented with this morning, there was a budget allocated for the artworks, and we had £500,000 to create some feature artworks throughout the 5 hospital sites. So here you can just see that we had a glass on the lift shaft. We commissioned some glass artists to do this piece here. The columns at the front of the children's hospital, painted in different colours, they were going to be painted grey, but there was an artist on the committee who said, come on, let's paint them the colour of the children's charity. So they did, and it's now become an iconic landmark in Manchester, much better than grey. And you can see at the front here, we've got the white heart sculpture. It's got a heart rate monitor inside it. The children love it, they hug it, families hug it. They go up to it and stand in circles around it and give it kisses and things. It's quite bizarre. And when you hold the heart rate, when you hold the handles, the sculpture beats to the rate of your heart. It also sends messages to the children on the children's ward, and they can interact with it. So they're just some examples of feature artworks when the new hospital was built. So that was 2009, so now we're much further on, 10 years later. It's like, well, what have you been doing in that time? How have you continued your artwork? So I shall explain. I am going to do some reading off my notes, and I hope that's not too irritating. I'm going to try and do it clearly and eloquently. Here we have a project in the children's X-ray department. The charity approached us and told us that they'd raised all this money and the staff were desperate to do something. The problem with the new hospitals is, unfortunately, the arts can't be installed in every single part of the hospital. So within the X-ray department, we had a challenge in that we had this very stark clinical space, and we had a very busy 24/7. It never closes, the X-ray department. We had a lot of distressed children in lots of pain. So we went in to the department, and we worked with the staff and the children to kind of ask them about what would they like to change, and what are the issues, what are the things that need addressing, what would make their service better, and how could we use the arts to increase the efficiency of the service. So we transformed it into a spaceship. So the main waiting area became like the central hub, like the spaceship, and there were 9 camera rooms, so each camera room became a planet in our solar system. So it all worked quite nicely. And here's just an example of one of the X-ray rooms, and we use a lot of vinyl, wallpaper vinyl, in the clinical spaces because it's infection control rated, it's fire rated, it's safe to use in hospitals, and it lasts for ages. It's very durable, and we can print our work on it. So here I've got a slide of the reception area before we turned it into the spaceship. And I like showing this slide because it's a brand new hospital. What the staff tend to do is stick things everywhere. I'm sure this doesn't happen here because you guys are really switched on when it comes to design and aesthetic. I've picked up on that. It's fabulous. But here the staff are desperately trying to make a clinical space. I think that's right, anyway. The staff are desperately trying to make a clinical space more child-friendly by sticking stickers up. This is what they do. So we came along and we did this. We turned it into a spaceship. So this has had quite an effect on the delivery of the service, because now when children come into the centre, they have reduced anxiety. They want to stay, they don't want to leave, their parents can't get them to go home. So we have a much happier environment, less anxiety and less frustration with waiting times, quicker turnaround because the staff can get the children to go through their treatments quicker. get to that bit. So the part of the consultation, part of the development of this work was working with the children to create the themes and the ideas. So the IT department donated all their old computers to us, and we built these robots with the children. So the robots were placed around the department, and they are very popular. The children made them, and when you're delivering these consultations and these workshops, you talk about the environment, and staff are involved, the families are involved, and the conversation is really, really important to the production. Again, it's all about process, and developing ideas as you're going through the project. And then the next slide is just an example of some work that the children made with the artists. So kaleidoscopic light boxes, each child was given a leaf to decorate, and then the artists collaged them and printed them onto HP film, put them in a light box, and they're positioned around the ultrasound department, and they're very effective. And I just wanted to show that because that's artwork made by the children and an artist collaborating together to produce some really nice stuff. So this is the one I wanted to get to. So the CT scanner on the left, this is just an example of how the artwork is so simple. Distraction in the scanner room to help the staff get the child through the scan more quickly. So this lady here in the glasses on the right, overjoyed with the arts project, she said, "This has made my job so much easier. When I've got children, especially children with learning disabilities and special needs, I get them to count the butterflies on the ceiling. And by the time they've counted them, they've been in for the scan. So instead of having to send children that get distracted very easily, instead of them having a scan 4 or 5 times, they can have the scan done in one go because they stay still. So that means the staff are, there's a quicker turnaround of patients coming through for the x-rays, and then obviously that has a cost, an impact on the cost to the NHS. X-ray machines are obviously very, very expensive to run and operate. So when we finished this project, a consultant who we'd worked very closely with, a consultant radiographer, he was so happy with the work that we'd done in the department and could really see the benefit to the service that the transformation had accomplished. And he wrote this for me. He said, "Lyme has made a crucial contribution to improve the experience of the children and their families in the radiology department. Our department has become a much friendlier environment for children who have become more cooperative when they are asked to lie down or remain still for their scans. The artwork helps manage a child's distress and generate more trust with staff. From a purely diagnostic perspective, we are now able to obtain higher quality images, and there are fewer cases where children require sedation for exams. When a child is distracted, we are able to obtain diagnostic images on the first go, hence reducing the amount of radiation used to obtain the information that is essential to make clinical decisions. Children can now better cope with fear and anxiety associated with the hospital environment and radiological procedures. Thank you, Lyme Arts, for making our children happier and my job much more enjoyable." That project also won 2 national awards for design. And there's just an example of the corridor. So each door, the issue with the service was the children didn't want to go into the x-ray rooms. They were scared. So we turned each entrance into a portal to a planet. This is Venus, planet of light. The children want to know what's on the other side of the door now, so they get them through really easily, which is great for the staff and the families. So another example of a project where we've used art to aid wayfinding through a very complex department, which is the Sexual Assault Referral Centre. patients using this facility are undergoing enormous amounts of distress, and they have to go through a particularly stressful and invasive examination and procedures so that staff can help them, and this is purely to help them move through the department. So we have artworks located at various places, designed in a certain way to aid people when they're moving through the environment and to help calm them and reassure them that they're in a safe place. So this is another project at the Children's Hospital. It's the burns unit. And in the burns unit, there's very, very, very painful procedures that go on. Children who are very traumatised, often very sedated. So we had to come up with some designs and artworks that would help the staff. And we spent a lot of time talking to the physio, the psychologists, and they talked to us about guided visual imagery techniques that they use to help the children through the procedure. And guided visual imagery is quite simply storytelling techniques that clinical staff use to help the children. So we designed a series of light boxes that you can see on this slide here, which have been illustrated, and they have lights. They have the lights change colour in the boxes. And the lights can also be controlled from an iPhone. So when you enter the space, you can give the child the iPhone and they can control the artwork from the bath where they're receiving treatment, if they're able to do that. These artworks in the Children's Hospital, it's very important when working with children that you don't patronise them. What can happen in children's hospitals are cartoon characters are used, when actually research shows, and there is lots of evidence to support the ability of children's brains to appreciate and engage with complex artwork and conceptual artwork even. Children are interested in interesting things. So these artworks, as you can see, appeal to adults and very young children, and the little baby in the picture there is being calmed down by the change in lights, and the staff have fed back to us and told us that quite often the clinicians will turn down the lights and let the parent take the child up to the light box so the baby, the little child, can kind of watch the lights and calm down before they do these unpleasant procedures. And the staff have said that this has really helped them again with their work and reducing anxiety in the children, but also the families as well. And these are some illustrations that we had made for this same department. It was all about illustration and storytelling and moving between imagined worlds. And again, the same project. So we had the light boxes on the walls, we had the illustrative elements, and we also work a lot with ceilings, because obviously you're in hospital, you're on a bed, or you need to look up. And here we removed 4 styrofoam ceiling tiles, really simple. Put a light in the ceiling, and we replaced the styrofoam with acrylic tiles, and we laser cut paper illustrations and sandwiched them between the acrylic tiles to again create these scenes that were open to interpretation and help the psychologists with their storytelling and their guided visual imagery. The lady in the picture is also illustrating how looking up at the ceiling can help clinicians deal with wounds to the neck and the upper part of the body. Apparently there is a very high, a lot of children experience scalds and burns in the upper part of their body. So again, that helps with the procedural work. So I wanted to include this project for you as well to demonstrate how we're not strictly limited to hospital environments. We also work in the community, and we work in different hospitals. We work in any setting that's related to healthcare well-being. And this is quite a controversial project because it's in a male prison. It's a high security male prison in Manchester known as Strangeways. It's got quite a reputation. And we spent a lot of time working with the prisoners and the art teacher in the prison. This is a project on the hospital wing at the prison. So the prisoners created all the artwork. So we had sessions. The art teacher coordinated things for us, and the lead artist did lots of work with painting and watercolour, and they were looking at sunset and sunrise and discussing artwork that they'd like in the building, in their environment. And like I said, the prisoners created all of this work, and the picture on the top right is a painting that's been produced by a prisoner that's never done a painting before. He's done lots of drawing, but he'd never painted before, and I think you can probably see that that's a pretty good quality painting for somebody that's never painted before. So all these magical things happen when you go into work with people as an artist in these environments, in the hospitals and the prisons. And I always tell this story about the holding cell. So the top left image is the holding cell where prisoners have to wait. I know you're probably all thinking, oh my God, is that really a prison? But top left is where prisoners wait to see the doctor. And I really wish I had some before photos, because the before images, it was like a kennel. It was like a dog's kennel. There was no toilet, and prisoners were going to the toilet on the floor. It was smelly. They were in there for up to seven hours, and it was very, very, very unpleasant. And because of that, prisoners were not going for their health checkups at the hospital. So when we decided to install this light box, which changes over 2 hours, and soft seats, and we put a new floor in, and we painted the walls, people were very, very, very unsure about what we were proposing, and people were against what we wanted to do because they said the prisoners are going to destroy it. They're going to tear the seats. They're going to destroy the artwork. It's going to be a complete waste of money. But we convinced people to work with us, and the artist was fantastic, convinced the staff that this was a good thing. And because of the engagement with the prisoners and how involved they became in the project and how committed to the project they became, we went ahead and we installed all this work, and then we left. And then we went back a year later, and we talked to the staff, and we were expecting to be told everything's been destroyed, they've ripped everything down. But no, everything was absolutely fine. It was as good as new. There was one area by the window where the plaster had fallen off the wall, and prisoners had hacked at this point next to the window. And there was one seat that had been torn, and the foam had been ripped out of the seat. But apart from that, the space was untouched. It was as good as new. And also, the hospital reported that the general health of the prison had increased by 85% because prisoners were now going for their health checks. I thought that was great. I thought that was really, really impressive, and a really good example of how transforming an environment can have a huge impact on, in this case, the health of a prison. So I just wanted to include a couple of community projects here for you as well. So we go out into the community and do stuff as well. Because Lyme's been established for a very long time, I often get phone calls from people saying, we have £10,000, please could you do a project with us? And I'm like, okay. So in this case, it was £10,000. They wanted to do a recipe book with people who have severe learning difficulties, adults and children with severe learning difficulties. And this centre is in the middle of a residential area, and it's a place where people go to stay overnight to give their carers and their families a break. So we met some wonderful people. I worked as a graphic designer for many, many years, and so I was asked to do the design on this book. So I worked with all the patients, and we came up with recipes, and then we employed a chef, and the chef came to the centre, and we made all the recipes, and I designed it, and then we had it printed, and then it was distributed to the surrounding community, and it was like an awareness raising project as well for the surrounding community to kind of communicate to those people that these people here are just like them, normal people who, you know, are just having a difficult time. Amazing Dr. Sober. So when I was at school, we used to have these really embarrassing sessions where the teachers were trying to teach us about drugs and alcohol and safe sex. And it was always really, really like cringy. We were just like, oh no, the teachers and the adults, they don't understand. So the idea behind this project came about. It was funded by Comic Relief. I don't know if anybody knows. Comic Relief is a big charity in the UK that funds projects relating to children. So for this one, we worked with a group of young people that had been excluded from school because they had issues with alcohol themselves, or their families, they were affected by somebody in their family who had an alcohol misuse issue. So we employed a director, a scriptwriter, and actors, professional actors, and they worked with this group of young people. And the young people, with support from the professionals, they wrote the script, they filmed it, they acted in it, and they produced this pack. So it's a public health exercise, but it's a pack addressing serious public health issues, but it's made by young people who are affected by those issues for other young people who are affected by those issues. And this pack was printed and distributed to all the schools in the northwest of England to be used. And then we have our music programme. So the Music for Health team have been delivering music across the central Manchester hospitals since 2009. The programme is headed by 3 music specialists, Ros, Mark and Holly. Ros, Hawley and Mark Fisher have experience of devising and leading specialist music programmes in disability, educational and residential settings, and in adult and children's healthcare settings. They have extensive experience of working with children and young people with limited or non-verbal communication, and children who have been hospitalised for a long time. Holly Marland is a qualified music therapist. You can see Holly down here on the piano. She's trained, Royal Academy trained classical musician, but she is not interested in that world. She wants to work in the hospitals with the people. She's an incredibly talented lady. And she established the Music for Health programme. She used to work at the Royal Northern College of Music, which is our big, fancy music college in Manchester, and she worked there for many years trying to promote this work within that institution. But then we brought the project over to the hospitals because we thought she needs to be based at the hospitals and working with Lyme. So we've worked ever since together to develop this project. In brief, the programme includes delivery of music on the wards at the bedsides of patients. The musicians have developed their own methods and techniques for using music as a form of communication so that non-verbal patients can communicate in some way with staff, with nurses and doctors. They've also trained the nursing staff and the doctors on how to use music themselves, music techniques to kind of work and communicate with patients. We also had a research project running alongside this music project. There was a big research project called the Medical Notes Project, conducted by the University of Salford in North Manchester. They have artist residencies for musicians from the surrounding music colleges, so the musicians, the students can go in to the hospital, they can work with these specialist musicians, and they can learn about how to work with people in hospitals, how to use their music practice in hospitals with children. And then we have the concert series, which is funded by the Royal Eye Hospital. We have a series of musicians, maybe 3 times a week we have performances in the atrium spaces for the general public, and people come into the hospital to see a music concert. So the surrounding community are using the hospitals as communal spaces to enjoy music together. The Youth Music funded Medical Notes research project showed how the provision of opportunities to engage in co-creative live music sessions with the Music for Health practitioners improved children and young people's psychological and social well-being during hospitalisation. The report demonstrated that the project had substantially enhanced the provision of music activity, that children and young people had experienced significant musical, social, personal and emotional development, and that the emerging Music for Health workforce had been strengthened through training and knowledge sharing. The evaluation also highlighted a significant need for a longer-term music programme at the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital, delivered by a core team of professional, specially trained musicians working on a regular basis. Okay, that's the portfolio section in summary finished. So that's just to give you an overview of the type of projects that we do at the hospitals. So, next slide. The next bit the reason why I'm here, the reason why Paulina invited me to come here to talk is to focus a little bit more on participation and the involvement of staff and patients in the creation of art. Next slide. So, what is the role of the artist in the hospital? It's to inspire people, it's to educate and share your skills with staff and with patients and with families, to then collaborate to create work and support people in that collaboration. So Lime has worked at the South Manchester hospitals for over 15 years, delivering a residency programme with people who have cystic fibrosis. I don't know how familiar people are with cystic fibrosis. It's a genetic disorder that people are born with, and it affects the lungs, and it's where the lungs fill up with mucus, and it's a really it's a nasty illness. All the patients have to be in individual rooms, separate from each other. And for a young person, for any person, that's quite a difficult situation to be in hospital when you're ill and on your own and worried and scared. So again, we did another recipe book, because people with cystic fibrosis have lots of issues around their diet, and they worry very much about their body image. They're young and they have to eat a really high calorie diet. The girls have issues because they don't want to eat loads of butter and cream, and it's really complex. And this project was my first residency as a visual artist in a hospital. So a colleague contacted me and asked me if I'd like to do this project because of the graphic design background. And she said also she'd like me to do some intensive consultation with patients to develop the designs. I spent a number of weeks, when I first started working on this project, I spent a number of weeks just sitting with patients and talking to them. They're in isolation and it's quite intimidating. I didn't have any formal training as an arts and health practitioner. I was just very passionate about the work, and I'd worked in the field for many, many years. But this was one of my first experiences of being an artist in the hospital, and it was transformational. I've had these moments throughout my working life as an artist and arts facilitator and project manager, where I've just had these mind-blowing experiences with patients and staff, and this was one of them. And what I did initially was I spent time talking to the patients, because you have to build an element of trust. They don't know who I am. I don't know who they are. I don't know anything about their illness, because it's, for this particular project, it was best to not know what the personal circumstances of these individuals were. So I went in purely as the artist to do creative stuff with the patients, try and make their experience of being in hospital, being in isolation, a little bit better for them. So we spent weeks chatting, and they got to know me, and we started talking about food, and they shared their favourite recipes, and over time I felt like I established an element of trust with the patients. Conversations started to highlight information surrounding the aspects of the illness and the complexities surrounding CF. Diet and body image was a major issue for these young people suffering with this illness. One male patient that I talked in great detail about the importance of his body image and how much he obsesses about what he eats. While we talked about recipes and design ideas, the discussions began to focus more on the aesthetic of the book, and it became apparent that this patient that I was working with, had a really big interest in art, specifically drawing and sculpture. So the patient went on to talk to me about a series of ceramic sculptures that he made during a period of particularly poor health, which he showed me on his phone. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of these sculptures, but I'll try and describe them to you. He showed me a collection of 5 figurative sculptures, each one varying in body mass. The figures represented his diminishing physical strength in contrast to his growing mental and emotional strength. Each figure, the larger figures, had small heads, and as the figures became more emaciated, the head became larger. And he explained to me that this represented him becoming iller, but through his illness and through his suffering, finding great mental strength and capacity to cope with what he was going through. And it was just a beautiful moment for this patient to show me this incredible work that he'd made. The sculptures were beautiful, and it was a moment, it was one of those moments I was like, wow, this is why I'm doing this work, and this is why I want to continue doing this work. And he said the sculptures and making art and making the sculptures helped him deal with what he was experiencing at that particular time. He said drawing stopped him from worrying about things. Drawing stopped him from worrying about things. So I realised very, very quickly that an arts project absolutely could not tackle the serious issues surrounding people with CF and their diet. So concentrating on the individual, I started to notice a recurring characteristic in people's personalities, and that was humour. Patients were often very quirky and had a very, very dark sense of humour. After multiple conversations, it became apparent that the more peculiar and obscure an idea, the more the patient seemed to engage. with the process and come up with their own ideas. And a theme emerged from conversations and research, which was simply playing with food. Using humour to make people think about what seems... So using humour to make people think creatively really seemed to work with these patients. So the theme playing with food was used to steer conversations, and patients started to research artists who worked with food. So we discovered this New York-based artist called Sadi Tekin and his project, Mr. Chickpea. So Mr. Chickpea, Sadi Tekin's Mr. Chickpeas, fed directly into the first workshops with patients. The initial response by patients to Sadi Tekin's chickpea characters was really positive. They thought the idea of drawing faces on chickpeas and turning them into characters was bonkers and mad, and that's what they really liked. So we used that and we went forward. And these are just some images of the chickpea people that the patients made. So this was like an icebreaker. This was like an early stage session with patients to do something fun. And I really wanted to give Darth Maul Chickpea his own slide because he's just brilliant. That's a currant, a raisin, and a chickpea that a patient spent ages doing Darth Maul's head, and he's got his red lightsaber. So I just wanted to put that there because he's great. So when you go into work with these patients, I mean, this is very playful. This was the way to engage the patients. I wouldn't have been able to engage them with, you know, taking monoprint in there or whatever I might have tried to do. So this really worked with them. So next stage of the creative consultations would involve a much more structured approach so that we could actually crack on with designing the book. But I just wanted to mention that equipment and kits that you take in to work with the patients, the quality of the kits that you're using, it's really important. So I took a macro lens, I took a SLR camera into the patients' bedrooms, and I took a macro lens and I taught them about basic camera settings, including shutter speeds and apertures. So with guidance from me, they were going to create their own mini worlds using these little tiny figures that I bought from the Train model making shop. Going into the Train model making shop was quite an experience in itself. You can get tiny figures of anything. I was quite shocked at what you can get, actually. And the man showing me the obscure figures was really into it. So yeah, kit, really important. We had the super duper camera. So Michael was a patient with CF. He'd been in hospital, he was in complete isolation. He'd been in hospital for weeks. This is the guy who made the sculptures, the creative guy. So when I was preparing for this talk and this conference, I spent a lot of time going through my old diaries. So as I said, this was my first residency as an artist, and I was learning so much. I was kind of just reacting day by day to what was going on and trying to understand the patients and understand how I could use different types of creativity to work with these people to create good quality outcomes, and in this case, photographs. So we had the kits, we had the little people, I taught them about the cameras, and I kept a diary, and it was quite detailed, and I've not read this diary for years. And when I was preparing for this, I went through the diary, and I've got an excerpt here. It's quite detailed about my experience of working with the patients, and I'm just going to read it out to you. So this is Michael, who I was working with. I arrived, and Mike was sitting in a dark room on the phone. I hesitated before entering and asked if I could go in. He said yes, but seemed quite reluctant, and his mood felt really low. I asked how he was, and he replied, "Not great." I took the camera with me, plus the new macro lens, 2 photography lamps, and the little miniature figures, kayaks and road workers. I explained what I was trying to achieve with the food world, and showed Michael some images and examples of other artists' work. I showed him the tiny figures, and his mood seemed to lift a little. He said, "They're cool." He then proceeded to get out of bed, turn the lights up, and ask me about the camera lens. What does it do? I explained and continued to go on and tell him about shutter speed and aperture levels. He was really keen to know what the technicalities of the lens were. I asked Michael for mini food world ideas based on the little figures that I'd just shown him. He suggested getting a cake with icing on it and putting the little plasterer figure next to it somehow. So it looks like he's plastering icing on the cake, he said. He also suggested using the meat pie that he had left over from his lunch. I was unaware that I had arrived at lunchtime and was possibly interrupting his dinner. He said he had no appetite, but I told him I'd leave for a short while so he could eat. I re-entered about 10 minutes later and he had finished off half the food on his plate. I started putting up the lamps and got Mike to put the camera on the tripod. Michael, by himself, set up the scene with the small figures around the meat pie. He carefully placed the figures, making it look like they were all building the pie. I went over what the different basic functions on the camera were again, a little bit more about depth of field and shutter speed. He began taking shots and I encouraged him to change the aperture and to keep testing the outcomes of different settings. Once he had taken quite a few shots, we removed the memory card and looked at the photos in more detail. We discussed each shot critically, one by one, looking at how the images were framed, focused and composed. Mike picked out the ones that he was happy with, and we noted down the aperture speeds and shutter speeds. Michael then set up another scene, placing the little kayaks in a gravy boat full of gravy, and without prompting or support, started to take shots again. He changed the levels at which he took the shots. He changed the angle, the height, the distance, completely self-directed the photo shoot. His mood was now energetic and he was asking me lots of questions. I noted that his mood, by this point, was the complete opposite of when I had arrived. He completely engaged with the activity and managing the creative direction of the session single-handedly. All I needed to do was prompt him to change aperture and shutter speed settings. But when I did, he changed them and correctly set up the camera based on what I had taught him earlier about distance and light. I was astounded by how quickly he figured out how to use the camera and the way he applied himself, completely taking control and directing the sessions. He also took some really great photographs. The session was coming to a close. Michael's mood was light, bright and positive. He opened a window and said, "This has been really great. I have learnt so much. I feel so much better than before." A doctor doing her rounds appeared at the door and asked Michael if he was okay. He said, "Yeah, I'm fine." "Do you need anything from me?" she said, meaning, "Do you need any medication?" "No," he said. He was beaming. The doctor asked, "What are you filming?" He said, "Stuff for the recipe book." She smiled and left the room. We finished photographing the last scene. Michael agreed to a short interview on my phone. I have a video, but I can't show it because it's sideways, unfortunately. So basically in the video, I asked him about the session and he explained how he'd learned so much about something he had never tried before. I asked him how he felt compared to the beginning of the session and he said he felt bubbly and brighter. He helped me pack up. We chatted about comics, art and New York, and then I left feeling rather inspired and bright myself. So I went on in my diary, I wrote some notes to myself afterwards And I just said, I feel like I've learned something really important about arts and health work today. I had an overwhelming positive experience with a truly inspiring individual, understanding on a deeper level the impact that the arts can have on people's well-being, and also maybe their resilience in hospitals. I saw a person suffering from a serious illness lift himself from a dark, moody place to a bright and bubbly place, all in response to taking a few photos with a nice bit of kit and learning some stuff. So Andrew, I'm going to give you one more example. It's another bit from my diary, but I really wanted to share this one with you because it was quite, it was a special moment for me working with this guy. So working with Andrew was really quite challenging. When I went into his room, he was very subdued and very quiet. The room was dark, the curtains were closed. I asked if he would like to do some creative stuff with me, and I said there's no pressure at all, just in case he was tired or he wasn't in the right mood to work with me. But I was quite surprised when he said to me, yeah, I'd like to do something with you. I'd already met him on a previous occasion, so he knew who I was, and I'd talked to him previously about this project. So he had an idea of what we were trying to do. But he was still, he'd done some chickpea figures, and his mood when we did the chickpea exercise was still fairly closed, but much more brighter in comparison to this point of going in to see him here. He was so withdrawn and lethargic. He was so quiet for the majority of the session. However, his mood did lift in the latter part. It's probably important to note that Andrew was a barrier patient on this occasion, and so very isolated. I also think he was about a week into his admission, and maybe not as well in comparison to the last time I had worked with him. He seemed to have a lot on his mind. However, regardless of Andrew's withdrawn mood, he did proceed to engage with the creative session. The same structure applied as in previous sessions. I showed him the little figures which made him smile, and I presented him with some meringues and squirty cream, which he would use as his food props to make the photographs. I then talked about the kit and the camera, the tripod. We set it all up. He was really interested. However, it was quite difficult to tell if what I was saying was making any sense to Andrew. He communicated both verbally and non-verbally very little, and I became very aware that I might be talking too much. So because of his mood, I was also aware of how I was explaining things, and I became quite anxious about the possibility of placing too much pressure on him. He seemed really, really fragile. I decided to stop talking and let Andrew take things in his own stride and ask me any questions when he felt the need to. Surprisingly, Andrew did take charge in terms of arranging the figures around the meringues. He placed the kayaks and squirted cream and designed the scene so it looked as if there was a river of cream falling into a lemon mountain into a meringue pool. It was all very imaginative, and he needed no direction from me whatsoever. He seemed to be enjoying his part, and he seemed to be absorbed by the task. As the session progressed, I moved the camera and changed the angle of the shot for him, as he did not appear to have the energy to do this himself. Assisting at this point was a good alteration to the session structure for patients in poorer health. Once I had changed the angles and distance, Andrew just needed to focus the lens, shoot, and then reap the reward of satisfaction by examining the images he was producing. Halfway through the session, Dr. Amanda and her colleagues doing their rounds entered Andrew's room. I became aware very quickly that I needed to leave the room. The doctors were with Andrew for quite a long time. After approximately 20 minutes, they left, and I quite anxiously re-entered the room. I was surprised to find Andrew sat by the camera, setting up a new shot. I interpreted this as a positive response to the session, or maybe the doctors had given him some good news. I left him to it, and he began to switch things around and set up his own shots. And at this point, he'd also opened the curtains, opened the window, turned the lights off. He asked me if I would take some shots. I felt like he really wanted me to, so I did. He sat casually back in his seat, cross-legged, and said, "I feel like an artistic director. You seem much brighter." It was nearing the end of the session. We looked through the images, and Andrew said, "My shots are not very good." I told him that was not true and explained how he had shot everything in full manual mode and how he should be pleased with himself, especially considering that he'd never used a digital camera before. He laughed and he said it was good. He also said that he had enjoyed it. As I started to pack up, he became much more animated, started to ask me questions about where I lived. He told me he lived in Wales. I said that's a great place to go walking, and he said he should probably do more walking given that he lives so close to the mountains. I asked him if he had learned anything new. He said, "Yeah, I've learned loads." I told him I would send him copies of the images. We chatted a bit more. He said the time had flown by. I spent on average between 2 and 3 hours a session with these patients. He then added, he said to me, "What you do really helps things in here." I told him it had been a pleasure, and I left his room. So then, just thinking afterwards, it struck me. I thought regardless of Andrew's appearing to be exhausted, he still approached the creative activity with concentration, and he worked for over 2 hours. He also seemed to have so much more energy at the end of the session than at the beginning. Very sadly, Andrew died before the recipe book was completed. His wife asked the nursing staff to pass a message on to me to let me know how important involvement in the project had been to him during the final weeks of his life. Okay, I'm going to speed up now. So that was an example of me working as an artist and my personal thoughts that I've just shared with you from my diary, and I hope that wasn't too boring, but I really felt the need to share that with people because it was a powerful, transformational time for me as an artist. Another project in the CF unit where I employed a new artist to work with me and supported them, mentored them and trained them was this illustration project. So this artist came into the ward and worked with these patients and their parents and created all these brilliant icebreakers to encourage artists to create their own abstract paintings based on their emotions. Getting anybody to draw a painting or draw a picture who isn't an artist is quite a challenge. So the artist did this very nicely. Next slide. And what she did was she created a series of works with patients. And the nature of the works were when the artist spent a significant amount of time with these patients, they started to open up and they started to talk to her about their experience in the hospital and the emotions and the things. Some people just talked about the pets and the pet dog at home, but others really started to open up. This is an example of a young lady that was waiting for a lung transplant. People with CF are quite often waiting for full lung transplants. And she created these drawings. She chose the colour of the paper. She painted the abstract shapes on the background based on mood and feeling at that time. And then the illustrator did these line drawings over the top of the patient's work, and they put together the words. I'm a mother of 2, and one of my fondest memories was a family holiday we went on about 10 years ago to a water park. It was fantastic. Unfortunately, due to being in and out of hospital, in recent years, I've not been able to do things like this as much as I'd like. When my youngest goes on holiday now, she usually goes with older family members. When I first found out that I had to make the decision about a lung transplant, I was really worried. My daughter had already lost her dad, and I constantly worry about not being there for my kids, not getting to see them growing up. But my worries kind of gave me the confidence to drive the feeling, gave me the confidence and drive to feel more positive about the operation. The lung transplant for me represents a second chance. I'm going through with the operation for my health, but also for my kids, and a chance at a better quality of life with my family. I'm seeing the operation as a great opportunity to be able to do things with my kids again. From simple activities like making sure they get a good home-cooked meal and taking them on more fantastic holidays. For these reasons, I'm now really excited about the operation. So that was a patient sharing her very innermost worries about this operation with the artist, and together they created these artworks. And I have a catalogue of multiple artworks that were created on this project, stories that patients shared about their experience, and I can send that to anybody who's interested in learning more about this storytelling project. And then we just have a quote from a staff member about how a patient had been so inspired that she decided to take up art classes after the end of the project. Then we've got the mortuary. Have I really been talking that long? We've got the mortuary project. So, again, gosh, very complex, complicated project in a children's mortuary at the Children's Hospital. I commissioned glass artist Sasha Ward to work with bereaved families who had recently lost their babies. All these families that we work with had lost babies within 6 months. And the focus was to enable the families to be part of the creative process and work collaboratively with the artist to create the artwork. We attended this coffee morning and we worked with over 60 individuals who we explained who we were, what we were doing, and we explained that our process was about including them in the creation of designs and artwork, and how their input as experts by experience was going to help other families in the future that would have to go through the terrible experience of using the paediatric mortuary. So the mortuary project was a process-driven project again. So this is basically a collaboration, and it's a collaboration between the artist, the service user and the staff, and everybody fulfills a creative role. The combination of the artistic and clinical expertise with the service user experience generates a really important dialogue that informs the creative process. This approach results in creation of the therapeutic environment, combining imaginative artworks and designs that are appropriate and respond directly to the complexities and the needs of these service users, and therefore also providing the very best value for money. A bereaved grandmother said to us, discussing the arts project has been cathartic for us. We were really worried about coming here today because my daughter had a terrible experience in the mortuary. And when we heard you were going to be here, we didn't want to have anything to do with you. But now we have talked to you, we think what you are doing is really important for other families, and how you are going about it with parents and families so involved is really good. I think what you are doing is going to help heal my daughter from trauma she has not been able to let go of. We will come back and see how things have developed at the next session. We want to be involved. So I've just got some slides of, this hasn't been installed yet, but I've just got some slides of before shots and after 3D renders produced by students at the school, the Interior Design School in Manchester. So this is the approach corridor. Parents expressed how they needed a space to sit down before entering the mortuary, and they needed a space to sit down after leaving the mortuary. So this corridor is not used by the general public in the hospital, so we're installing glass panels in this window that have been designed. The design's been created with the parents and the families. And the window's south facing, so we get the sunlight through this area, and it creates a very calm, very safe environment for these families. And then the waiting corridor, you can see on the left, this is the current corridor where the families have to wait before they go into the viewing suites to see the children. So there's a viewing suite for babies, there's a viewing suite for older children, and together with the families, we designed this artwork on the wall. I wish I had the original concept artwork to show you, and then you could see how it had developed and changed. A lot of really interesting stuff came out of the consultation with the families on this. References to nature in this particular area were not appropriate. We always think references to nature are just, we assume that it's completely appropriate and suitable for hospital spaces, but parents who had lost babies expressed how references to nature weren't appropriate for them because they'd never been outside or left the hospital space. And we talked in depth about colour, and parents whose babies had passed away talked very much about silver, grey and beige colours, and how I'm rushing this now, but we had really in-depth conversations about design and colour and form and composition, and the parents were so engaged with the artists and they were so involved and they committed to the project, and they came back at various stages throughout the project to feed into the process and make sure that their voice was heard, and that they were empowered because they knew that they were creating change. They had a voice to create change and help others in the future. So here's the viewing suites are split into two halves. There's a sitting area, and then the window you can see looks through into the bedroom. So these are the designs that we've come up with for these spaces. This is the suite for the older children. And just to point out here that it was very important, the position of the artwork in this bedroom is very high. And if you're sat in that seat, you know, you don't want to be looking at artwork. You're looking at your child in the bed. So it would have been very inappropriate to have any sort of artwork on that wall that that parent would be looking directly at when they're in that space. So that's why we've done this design around the top of the room. And again, this all came out through the consultation with the parents. We would not have been able to do this project without working with these bereaved families. The baby suite, again, the beige and the grey references that families kept making to colourways, the artist interpreted into silver and gold. So she looked at precious metals as being the overall theme, creating the gentle environment that was necessary for this suite. And again, the baby's bedroom with the artwork positioned above the sofa, completely inappropriate to have any sort of artwork in the direct line of view for these families. I was going to suggest a 5-minute break here because I thought I'd be much quicker, and I was going to get you all to draw each other. I thought it'd be a nice breather for 5 minutes, but draw yourselves on the coffee break. That's you've got to draw your partner, you've got to draw the person sat next to you. You've got 1 minute, and we want to collect all the pictures so we can kind of put together everybody who's been here today. Oh my God, 5 minutes, right. So, anyway, that's the journey. I've given you a potted history of Lyme. We've had the projects, we've had the participation, working with families, working with patients, involving them in the process. And I've got to the point now where I'm in a position where at the hospitals, we have quite a lot of regulations in place, limitations and restrictions as to what we can do to the built environment, i.e. the walls, the ceiling. So because we don't own the hospital, a private landlord owns our hospital, so for us to do anything now, we have to pay considerable amounts of money to get permission from the landlord to install work. So the mortuary project has not been installed to date. We've received a bill for £17,000 to install the artworks, and we don't have the budget for that. So at the moment, there's a lot of negotiation going on at the hospitals as to who is going to cover the cost of these fees set by the private landlord to do the work. So I've been getting very frustrated in Manchester, and I've thought this is I'm not connecting with the people. I need to be doing work with the people, giving them creative experiences, and I'm just sat in my office doing reams and reams and reams of paperwork. What am I going to do? So I'm a printmaker, and for many years I've been struggling as artist and arts and health practitioner, and it's always been very separate. My artistic practice has always been very separate to the work that I do in the hospitals. So I thought, right, I'm going to buy an etching press. I'm going to buy an etching press. I'm going to have it in the office, and I'm going to turn the office into a printmaking studio so that we have an on-site printmaking facility at the hospitals, so that we can have an artist residency programme. We can have an artist residency programme whereby we're bringing in printmakers or anyone with an interest in printmaking. It could be any artist from any discipline, going out, working across the hospitals 1 afternoon a week with staff and with patients, making art. I've lost my train of thought now. Yeah, so it would be the first on hospital printmaking facility in the UK. So this was a combination of me being printmaker and combining that with my arts and health work. So this is an artwork. This is a monoprint that I saw in the Tate Modern a few weeks ago. And I just had it was like an epiphany. I just thought, right, this is what I need to do. I need to have the printmaking ongoing at the hospitals, and I need to share this. I'm a printmaker, I love monoprint. I need to share this technique and this skill with the people. I need to teach them about monoprinting. So that's what I did. Anyway, I just told you a big fat lie. That print was not at the Tate Modern. That print was actually made by that gentleman there, sat down at the table, who'd never made a print in his life. His name's David, and he's a patient on a high security mental health unit. So I've been testing my theory, and I've been commissioned recently to create some artwork for a new hospital that's being built in Lancashire, and it's 5 high security mental health wards. So I insisted when I got the commission that I was going to be able to work with these people who use these inpatients who are currently on the wards. So I bought some really good quality ink, and I took all my rollers, and I took some bits and bobs, and I went over to this place in Chorley to work with these people, and I showed them how to make monoprints. The next slide is kind of irrelevant. This is just some of my work. I had to get it in. I had to get a plug in. There's my Instagram. But I'm really, really, really interested in monoprint. I love it, and I'm very passionate about printmaking, and I'm very, very passionate about sharing my skill. I've been trained, you know, I've got quite extensive printmaking training, so I wanted to share this with people that would probably never be able to access that level of art training. So that's why I went into the mental health ward and just showed them some really simple techniques. So the thing with monoprint is it's very free. If you've got any printmakers here, you'll get this. It's very free, it's very expressive. You can make some really, really, really nice artworks from very simple marks. So that's what we did. And these people here were all on really high levels of medication. They were very subdued when they came into the print workshop, into the art room, and difficulty concentrating. The nursing staff said, David will probably just get up and leave. He struggles to engage with activities. David stayed there for the entire day, as did all of these ladies. The lady in the middle, as you can see, my theory is that physical activity, being part of a community, being part of a group, being with your fellow man, and creating, doing art, is the key to happiness, well-being, whatever you want to call it. It's the key: creativity, physical activity, community. The lady in the middle had not eaten for over a week, she was doing the printmaking. I showed her what to do. As you can see, they're all stood up. They've all got seats, but they're all stood up. Printmaking is hard work. You build up a sweat, so it's physical. The lady made about 15 artworks. She also ate 2 sandwiches and an entire box of chocolates. So the nursing staff were like, oh my God, thank God she's not eaten. This is so good, she's not eaten. The process, the technique, it was a really, really good process, and it worked specifically for these people in this environment. And they produced some really, really, really nice artwork. I have to show this shot of this lady here because she got so into the whole process. You know, when you're printmaking, the magic is with the reveal. So you've got your paper on your ink. Peeling it off, you've got no idea. Usually with monoprint, you've got no idea what you're going to get. It's like magic. And it's just a beautiful image to show, like, she's looking at her image and then she's studying the artwork. So yeah, so here's just some samples of artworks produced by patients on the mental health unit, monoprints. And I think you'll agree that all of them are probably worthy of being mounted and framed and hung in a gallery. There we go. So yeah, the new vision is to create the printmaking studio and have these ongoing artist residencies, and for me to combine my artistic skills, my passion for creating monotypes, really, that's what I'm obsessed with, and enabling others to do that as well. So this is where I'm at the moment. I've just done a proposal and I've got funding to buy the etching press, and to set up an artist residency programme, working on a series of projects with dementia patients and the nursing staff in the Women and Children's Hospital, teaching them all how to do printmaking. I also intend to do demonstrations and work with local artists who can come in and teach the cleaning staff, the domestics, for example. My point is to take this technique and this art form to people who would not normally be able to access it. So that's where I'm at. I'm sorry, I've prepared far too much information and I've gone over time. Have I gone over time? Are we done? Oh, so, I'm sorry, I forgot you at the time. So yeah, art for everyone at the hospital, that's the aim, in a response to these difficult political situations that we've got ongoing with the private owners of the hospitals. So yeah. That's it. That's the presentation. Thank you, everybody.